Wifey.
Excuse me?
Kevin Seifert, should we be devastated that Asante Samuel Jr. is not signing with us, but apparently is instead has been signed to the Pittsburgh Steelers practice squad?
Well, I mean, they hosted him for a visit last week. I think we both know that cornerback is not a position where they have the most depth on their roster, and they lost Jeff Okudah to injury reserve because he's had a couple of concussions, and their third cornerback right now is a guy named Fabian Moreau, who's a veteran that for the past 2 years has not come to training camp, but they had him on their roster for depth, and he's not bad in that sense, but I think it suggests that they at least wanted to see if there was an opportunity here to add somebody. And, there's a serious, he had spinal fusion surgery, so there's a serious health risk there. And obviously he's cleared by doctors or the Steelers wouldn't have signed him. But, I think it's fair to say they could use some more depth there, but this was not meant to be.
Well, he's not that old. That's the thing. The surgery is significant. We looked it up the other day. He's like 26 years old.
No, it's
so it's worth it. I mean, I could see how it would be worth a shot, worth a look, right? Especially for depth purposes.
It was definitely a good idea to bring him in for a visit, for sure.
Are you aware of what happened on this day in Minnesota sports history 24 years ago?
Was this the Dan Minnesota post on the Randy Moss? Yes.
Well, what this was the story.
We had a double byline.
That's why I'm bringing it up. I don't know how many stories we double bylined. I don't think a bunch.
Emotional.
That might have been the only one. And I don't even remember what I gave you. I think I gave you much for this story, and you were kind enough to include it.
My guess is I was way too selfish to do that unless somebody gave me like the critical. You must have confirmed the actual news of the fine.
Maybe that's what it was. Well, I wonder who I would have gotten that from.
I don't know, but I don't think you should say now.
No, it's the statute of limitations running out on
sourcing. This is not like Deep Throat unless the person is no longer with us.
What we're talking about is this was when Randy Moss, verbally abused corporate sponsors on the team bus. That was after a Vikings loss to the Eagles, ultimately fined $15,000 required to attend anger management. Yet a headline reads, Moss fine revealed. Witnesses describe November outburst on team bus by Kevin Seifert and Dan Barreiro. That's a historic part because I don't think we had very many. That might have been the only double byline.
I think it was a few game notebooks.
Might have been some notebooks where I might have occasionally. Yeah. Not like Royce, though.
Royce used to write the whole thing.
He used to write the column, the two sidebars, and lead the notebook.
Royce's goal covering a road NFL game was to leave. From the start.
Yes.
And if it meant that he needed to write his column and then write the entire notebook afterwards to get us out of there quicker, he would
absolutely do it.
Yes.
Yeah, I've told this story before. I was a little more deliberate writer in terms of the time I needed to do whatever I was going to do. I was more the tortured artist guy. And there was once a month, especially if we were, it could be home, could be road, more likely actually home, where he's clacking on the Radio Shack, the little Radio Shack. He's just clacking. Yeah. I mean, he's just and I'm steaming because I'm still working on the,
your first sentence.
Lead.
Yeah.
And there's that moment where he slams down the cover of the Radio Shack computer. I'm done. Yeah. And that's what he'd say. I'm done. It's like, okay, we're happy for you. That you're done, Royce. None of the rest of us have even begun, and you're done. That's great. Well, that's wonderful.
Part of the reason why no one else could be done is because Royce sort of had a way of talking through as he was writing his column. Yes. He'd be like, how many R's in terrible?
Yeah. Yes.
How many R's in horrendous performance? Yeah. And so by the time
trying the lines on us and look for the laughter.
Yeah, answered all your questions. He was done and you hadn't started.
Yeah, that's very, very true. What else do we need? I felt regarding the Ravens game, I'm curious to get your view on this. I was ripping all the pundits Sunday because I said, we did an unscientific poll or research on national outlets predicting on that game. And we literally found, I think it was like 38-2. And I thought that was ridiculous because I said, I can get picking the Ravens, but people are acting like this is going to be the upset of the century. Ravens are cute. I know they got Lamar back. They just beat two terrible teams. Well, I thought maybe that's wrong. And the Bears was one of them and the Dolphins, who are pretty terrible. And I just thought it was being billed as this almost impossible challenge for the Purple. Well, obviously it didn't work out for the club. But early, I felt pretty cocky. I felt pretty good because I didn't think the Ravens looked all that impressive or interested. I didn't even think Lamar looked particularly dynamic early. But my concern was I felt like at halftime we should have been ahead by more than 10-9. That was the stretch where we needed a 10-point lead at the half instead of a 1-point lead at the half. The old deal of you got to take, when the game's going your way, you kind of got to take advantage of it. Yeah. And I didn't think we did a very good job of that in the first half. And I think that I'm sure that encouraged the Ravens to say this game's right here for us.
Well, then they start the third quarter with an interception and then a field goal, and then wasn't that the fumble after that?
Yes.
And basically, in some ways, the Vikings handed them that turning point.
Yep.
And the Ravens tried to give it back. Why they were throwing the ball at the end, they were in Andrew Van Ginkel. Andrew Van Ginkel on the last third down managed to knock the pass down. He was going to intercept the ball until Lamar Jackson they were an Andrew Van Ginkel interception away from having great field position with a chance to score and had 2-point conversion to tie when they, as Christian Darrisaw said, they shouldn't have been remotely in that game given all the penalties and those two turnovers.
That's true. The interesting thing is before that, the Ravens were it was run after run after run, right? When they got into that stretch where the game was theirs, it looked like we're just going to pound it until, as you say, they opened the door
but
again.
But it was working. Like they had Derrick Henry.
Absolutely working. Yes.
I think you wear on the
scat
defense.
backs. Yeah. It definitely worked. What's your best intel on the cadence thing? Because I get the bit. We're all in it together. It's different, different play, different false starts related to different issues. And I think to a certain extent the team has to say that. But no one's going to convince me that the thing at the top of the list is not the quarterback.
Yeah.
In terms of the way he emphasizes whatever the cadence is, to me, that's the only thing that's different. So to me, that's got to be it at the top of the list.
And he did take full responsibility. But I think that's part of it. And I think they also have a pretty complicated, in my viewpoint at least, pre-snap, where they motion a lot. There's a lot of orchestrating. They happen, in terms of, and as John Harbaugh said, there was evidence that they were trying to go on two a few times to pull the Ravens off sides, and then they had a lot of the motions that they did, and there's just a lot to orchestrate there. And I think it goes back again to, they're giving them the full amount of NFL level stuff. They're not, I don't know exactly what cadence they ran on every single time or how many different ones they even use, but they're not. I don't think that they're giving him kid gloves even on the pre-snap stuff. He's definitely smart enough to handle it, but again, you have to do it a lot. And to me, and I don't want to go back on the quarterback too much, but to me, all these things point out that if we're saying he needed more reps, he needs reps. I think at some point we'll probably start thinking should they have used him more in the preseason? And normally I'm the preseason is dumb. Preseason is just an injury waiting to happen. Just get out of that part of the season without, debilitating your entire, regular season. But it's very clear that, he needed those reps could have helped him in some way, even if it's just practicing what we're talking about.
I agree. No question.
Even if it's just, a little bit more muscle memory on the fundamentals or whatever that is one that I think is worth of further questions at some point down the road.
Gargi, some bonus points or bonus bucks, I should say.
Bonus bucks. The Fan and Two Men and a junk truck want to help with that. It's our national cash contest. Keyword for the 4:00 hour is deposit. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword deposit.
Fan.
One more quickie with Seifert before we chat basketball with Mitch Lawrence and ode the late, great Lenny Wilkins with him. Talk some Wolves as well. Should Justin Jefferson have caught the touchdown pass or the pass at the goal line? Is that a play that if he's doing what we associate with him, that he makes?
Well, he routinely makes great catches, and that would have been a great catch. So I think it's fair to expect that from him, but not to hammer him for not doing it.
That's fair.
And I know there's been a lot of discussion about him. And
how about with the return? There's a lot of there seems to be a difference of opinion within the media community on how hard to come down on JJ for his reaction.
Lieber's opinion in turn. I mean, he's been out there and he knows the difference. And we do have a history in this town of receivers walking in times when it's not expected of them.
That's true.
And so. The reason it stuck out is because it's just unusual for Justin. Like you don't see him, and I know he probably thought that, or he was
down by contact,
aware that it was down by contact, but you just don't often see him, reacting, like being so disconnected from what's going on in the field. And it happened twice on both the interceptions. And there were a few, there was the catch that could have been a touchdown. There was a route towards the end of the game, I think, that was, near that far end zone where it looked like it wasn't his best route ever. Wes Phillips, the offense coordinator, said that I think his quote was, "I think he deserves a little bit of grace," which he didn't say whether that was because of the walking or because of the overall performance, or probably both. It wasn't his best game. It wasn't a great look, but I don't think that if there's more to read into it than that, I'm not aware of it.
Well, what was the defensive breakdown on the was it Andrews wide open in the end zone? What the hell happened there?
The Ravens' last score of the game that basically accounted for the final
difference.
They had like 1st and goal at the 2, and they line up this sort of spread formation, and Mark Andrews is a tight end. He's kind of lined up as a slot receiver, and you see Harrison Smith trying to wave, coming over to that side and trying to wave somebody else over, and nobody ever does. And so Mark Andrews just is uncovered, and he takes like 4 steps into the end zone, turns around, catches the ball for a touchdown, and nobody ever defended him. And so I asked Flores about that today, and he said there was a miscommunication. A lot of the people who watched the video thought that Harrison Smith was trying to bring Josh Metellus over. I don't know that for a fact that that's who should have had, Mark Andrews and should have been covering him, but I know that that's what it looks like when you watch the video, at least. And so, but ultimately Flores said that it's a situation where you're trying to pass coverage along the line of scrimmage, and it didn't get fully communicated. And in the end, he felt like he didn't really call a very good coverage, make a good coverage call for that play, and should have done a different one. So he took the responsibility, but it kind of got covered up in all the McCarthy talk and Jefferson and all that. But like that was essentially the winning touchdown, and the guy was a coverage bust.
Who is the best team in the division?
Well, it's a crazy league, as Sid would say. Like right now, 2 weeks ago, you would have said Packers. I still think the Packers will be pretty good. At least you can say their loss to the Eagles was against another really, really good top 3 or 4 team, and certainly in the conference, if not in the division. And so, I don't feel like their season's over because they lost by 3 points to the Eagles, even though it was at home. So I think they're still really good. They've already beat the Lions once. We'll see what happens when they play again. But I think there's a lot there. When your defense is as good as the Packers' defense appears to be, that's the formula for playoff runs.
I am going to guess. I've not checked this. Garzi will be able to do it. I think maybe before I think he's about to leave. Vikings, Bears. I'm going to say the Vikings are favored by 2.5. Do you have any idea if that's right? We'll double check it. I'll try to. In fact, I think maybe the relay is taking place right now. I'm going to say, without looking, Vikings are favored by 2.5 over the Bears.
I know they're favored, but let me see.
And that's my intro into whether you believe the Bears should be
2.5 to 3, depending on the sports book.
Not bad. So, should the Bears? How seriously should the Bears be taken at this point? We know their record is 6-3. That's 2 games better than our club. They've got a last place schedule, and they've played the softest part of that last place schedule early. It's about to they got a lot more division games coming up where you think it's going to start getting. They got I think 4 or 5 tough games in a row. If I remember what Courtney Cronin wrote. So how seriously should the Bears be taken at this point?
If you're the Vikings, you take them very seriously because there's not a single game that they can afford to believe that they're that they're much better than the opponent when they walk on the field, given where they are in the standings. And so, the Bears had them beat in Chicago. They had them beat.
Yeah.
And then they collapsed, and the Vikings took advantage of that and got rolling and scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, something that's not going to happen very often.
Phantom penalty is what opened the door for us in that game. If you recall, the Bears were driving again. They got a weak-ass call against them, changed the whole drive, and that was it.
Pass interference. Yeah.
I don't remember what the call was, but it was not a very it was a gift.
Well, and so I think, that there's a lot to be said for confidence and momentum, and the Bears have both of those things, and they have an equalizer at quarterback. While Caleb Williams isn't throwing it as well as a Sam Darnold or whoever you would pick as your top quarterback in the league this year. But he certainly can equalize things with his legs. I mean, he took over that game against the Giants.
We're not playing for the division at this point, right? If we're playing for anything, it's to just get in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean,
although you could say it's a 2-game gap, actually, right, in the loss column. So,
like our ESPN.
What do we got?
Projections has their playoff chances at like 7.9%, and the division, is like 2 or 3%.
Okay.
So it's
neither of those are attractive, but not impossible.
No, and there's not a huge gap in between those. But so basically, because they still have a lot of games left to get, they're 2-0 in the division, and they have the rest of their games still to go. So the opportunity, at least, to not only win. To continue winning, but to bring down the records of the other NFC North teams is still there.
Please ask Seifert, why on earth did KOC go for 2 on that touchdown? If he's using analytics, he should use his own brain. I think the analytics say do what he did.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I don't know that I love it, because can analytics ever evaluate mental letdown after, the surge of scoring a touchdown and then the letdown of not making the 2-point conversion, what that does to you mentally?
Hopefully, if it does much to you, then you're probably not going to win anyway. Like, basically what it does is it gives you a clear understanding of what you're going to have to do to either tie the game or win the game, and as opposed to the other way around. And so, if you make it, you have a chance to win the game with a touchdown and an extra point. So that extends your there's a slight increase in win probability in that situation, and so I think that's why teams do it. And I don't think that clearly they never got in position to even try the 2-point conversion to try to tie, and so I can't say it really had an impact in the game.
So that your QB story is dropping tomorrow, you think, or tonight?
So.
Late tonight,
tomorrow morning. Yep.
Okay, tomorrow morning.
Yep.
All right, we'll look forward to that, and we'll see you soon. I hope.
Yeah, sounds good.
Next week.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm going to the ball yard this week. I should. It's Bears week.
If you don't, you could come with us to Lambeau the following week.
Oh, there you. Oh, Lambeau trip. Been a long time.
I bet.
Lambeau trip would be good. Blakemore would probably rather go with you. He's a big Packers rube, as you know.
Confirmed.
Yes. That's confirmed. Thanks, man.
All right.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. We'll come back and change the subject pretty dramatically. We'll check in with our old buddy Mitch Lawrence on a number of NBA subjects, Wolves included, general manager dismissal out of Dallas, and ode to a dead guy as well. Our guy Mitch next.
Get ready to go crazy, Wolves fans. The debut of the Prince-inspired City Edition uniforms happening this Saturday against Denver Nuggets, and you can be there. You can check out our contest page so you could win a pair of tickets to Saturday's game. Be the first to experience the uniforms, the Prince-inspired court, and a whole lot more. KFAN.com, keyword contest. Enter today.
It's time for Ode to a Dead Guy.
I can't think of anybody better to give proper respect and homage to Lenny Wilkins. Story breaking just a couple of days ago that he has passed away at the age of 88 years old. A lot of the kids don't know the name. Let me fill you in. 9-time All-Star in 15 seasons, averaged 16.5 points and 6.6 assists for 3 different teams. He was named to the NBA's 50th anniversary team in 1996 and to the 75th anniversary team in 2021. Also honored as a top 10 and top 15 coach as part of those anniversary celebrations. He's in the Hall of Fame like 3 different times as well. He was a player coach. Just a remarkable legacy And a lot of people in the NBA have been spending a lot of time trying to put his career in perspective and to give him proper due. Mitch Lawrence is going to help us with that now, joining via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Thank you very much for the time, sir. You can still hear Mitch via Sirius XM often as their number one fill-in on a number of outstanding programs. I know, I covered a little bit of playoff stuff with Lenny back in the Dallas days. You covered probably more. When you think of the name Lenny Wilkens, what comes to mind for you in your own experiences?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I grew up outside New York City, and Lenny Wilkens, after Bob Cousy, who is really the godfather of point guards, and New York City is known for great point guards through the years. After Bob Cousy, then it was like Lenny Wilkens, who was the great point guard who grew up in Brooklyn, played there, went to Providence College, had a stellar college career, and then as a pro, he had an amazing career, an all-NBA type of player. And then, obviously, after a great career in St. Louis and playing for different organizations, he's a coach of Seattle when Seattle wins the World's Championship.
Yep.
And obviously, for people who don't know, that's before they went to Oklahoma City. But he did it all. And he was a class guy, consummate, professional, very approachable, maybe not the greatest quote, but a guy who you could definitely talk to about, anything involving basketball. And his players really did like him a lot. A player's coach, they knew because he had great success as a player himself. He was a player coach even back in the day. That what Lenny, told him was not just, criticism, but it was coaching from a standpoint of he wanted to make his players better. And he had a lot of great teams.
He did.
Later on after Seattle, of course, the teams I remember, and I covered a lot, were the Cleveland teams that had the misfortune, like the Knicks teams of that era of the 90s, of having to go up against Michael Jordan. I think they lost 4 playoff series, including that celebrated Michael Jordan shot against Craig Elo. And, Lenny, unfortunately, was on the losing end, but there are a lot of coaches who were like that, right?
Everything he did felt understated, right? He was obviously a very talented player and a very good coach, but he was not over the top in the way he played, and he was not over the top, obviously, in the way he coached as well. I learned something that I didn't know, and one of the stories I'd read, perhaps you knew this, you mentioned the New York part of this story, in Brooklyn, more specifically, that he occasionally delivered groceries to Jackie Robinson, happened to be a neighbor. Did you know that one? That one, I if I knew it, I'd forgotten it. That's a great bit of background.
Yeah. A few years ago, I had a chance. We had Lenny on to talk about, I can't remember what, but he did delve into that, and I think he just volunteered that himself about Jackie Robinson, about growing up. I also know that he did face, in the late 50s in St. Louis, faced some racism.
Yes, right.
Not surprisingly, unfortunately, but that's the way this country was back then. When he and his wife, I think in his second year, were able to purchase a house, and when they got to their house or whatever, there were a bunch of their neighbors who had for sale signs up.
Yes,
they were looking to leave and get out. So, listen, he lived a long, great life. He faced a lot of adversity that black men obviously did of his era and even later on. But he accomplished so much that he really is one of the NBA. I mean, here's a guy who won over 1,000 games, a coach over. I mean, he had a ridiculous record, and he's as much as the old New York basketball fan still remembers him. The people of Seattle revere him as the guy out there because of what he did with Gus Williams, Jack Sickman, that team that beat Washington and the Dick Motta Bullets for the title back then, which was the only title the organization has had until this last year when they did it in Oklahoma City as the Thunder.
So he was in Seattle. Became the league's second black player coach, right? Bill Russell had done it as well, and then returned 5 years later as coach only. It always fascinates me, that the ability to do both Do you think there's ever? I mean, do you think we're ever going to see that again, Mitch? That there's ever a chance we might see the return to the player coach?
I think every time that's come up, I think there's a rule maybe now.
Okay, you can't. Okay.
Although a lot of people say LeBron James at different points of his career has been a player coach with as much authority and power as he exerts on the court. But no, I think they kind of phase that out. And I don't know anybody who really wants that headache, because the game is hard enough to play, and then you got to deal with today's athletes and today's basketball players who I'm sure Lenny and Bill Russell had challenges, when they were player coach. But can you imagine in this day and age of social media and everything the players are all about, what that would be like? That might drive a guy out of the sport entirely. I don't think we'll see that.
You're right about that. By the way, before we get into some current stuff, including what's been going on down your way, Dallas Mavericks related, I think the story broke earlier today. Michael Ray Richardson has died at the age of 70 years old. You got a good Michael Ray Richardson. Again, for the folks who, maybe have heard the name, but I haven't been around long enough to really appreciate sort of who he was and what he represented. What do they need to know about Michael Ray?
He was an immensely talented and troubled player, because this was back at a time he played in the league when there were a lot of players who used cocaine.
Yeah.
And he was one of them, and he has the distinction, unfortunately, even though when he played and he was straight, he had phenomenal seasons, Dan. But here's a guy who's known also as the first player to receive what they call the lifetime ban, which is really a 2-year ban.
Yeah.
That happened in 1986. And he apparently tested positive for cocaine like 3 times over the last 2 years. And so the league, exercised that authority under the anti-drug program to throw him out. He was reinstated, but he went to Europe, and he played there, I think, until I read somewhere that he was 46 years old when he was still playing. He liked Europe a lot more. He only, practiced limited, play once a week. I remember him as a Knick. New York was definitely too big, too fast, too wild for him. And then he was obviously, he had his greatest years as a New Jersey Net when they played in the Meadowlands. And he was a great scorer and a great, he's just had a great all-around game, a big guard. And unfortunately, his career was derailed. As we saw it in Dallas with Roy Tarpley later, and there are other players. This is a time, I think the Washington Post in 1980 did a poll where anywhere between a poll of players and executives, maybe coaches too, and the range was anywhere from 45 to 70% of the players were estimated to be on cocaine, using cocaine at that time.
Wow.
So that's the type of error it was, and the league obviously had to have a major crackdown. Also suffered a tremendous tragedy in the Len Bias story. You don't know about that.
Right.
But yeah, Michael Ray Richardson was part of that whole thing, and it's just unfortunate. But anybody who played against him, he's also apparently walked into I read this. I didn't know this until I read about it today. Where apparently he would walk into the Laker locker room before the Nets would play the Lakers and tell Magic Johnson he was going to kick his butt. If you can believe that.
I can actually. Yeah.
That's the type of guy he was.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. All right, let's bring it to what's going on down Dallas way. It was made official today that the Mavericks have fired their general manager, Nico Harrison. Do you view this as inevitable? Do you view the timing as fair given all the injuries that the Mavericks face right now? Or what do you make of the move?
Well, they haven't had their 2 best players, Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. Cooper Flagg has not exactly torn the league up, but the problem is that they just saw their 24-year sellout streak end. This is with a number 1 overall pick playing for them in Cooper Flagg. Not a lot around him,
right?
But owners pay attention to that, and I think owners also pay attention to the fact that the whispers from players were that because of the constant fire Nico chants that the fans they were still using, even last night, his last game there when they lost to the Bucks late. It got to players and and I'm sure Jason Kidd didn't like it, and I'm sure the players, and I'm sure Patrick Dumont, who replaced Mark Cuban as the owner, didn't like it. And until they were going to get Nico Harrison out of there, they were going to continue to play it with a home court disadvantage, which you can't have. And it's unfair to the players. But that's the way the passion of the fans here still view this trade of Luka Doncic as a deal breaker for them. And a lot of fans, if they didn't go to the games, the Sullivan Street is over. But there were fans who went there basically to chant and fire Nico. So they had to do something. The weird thing was, Patrick Dumont was the owner, not Mark Cuban, but when they made the trade, he was all in, Patrick Dumont. He approved the trade. The word was that I heard, is that he didn't want to pay Luka Doncic his next big extension.
Correct.
Because Luka Doncic was out of shape. Luka Doncic didn't have the fire and the competitive edge he felt that were, shown by other great players of the past like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, et cetera. And that he bought Nico Harrison's game plan, which was we're going to bring in Anthony Davis and we're going to try to have Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and the rest of the cast from the team that went to the finals a couple of years ago and make a deep run. Well, they didn't, because of the whole atmosphere in Dallas at these games. They thought that's untenable. It couldn't continue to do that, so they had to fire him. And so nobody's really surprised. As a matter of fact, down here, it is everybody celebrating this, which you could see, the fans. But, the caution is that the guy in charge here, the owner, is still the guy who signed off on the trade. A trade that it's still unbelievable for two reasons. The fact that they traded him at the age of, 25 or 26 after they had just been to a finals, and the fact that they didn't get much in return. And Anthony Davis has only played 14 out of a possible 44 games, and he's hurt and he can't play again. So everything just went wrong. This whole thing just blew up in their faces.
I think you hit on the key part of this, because I think you could say, well, it's kind of disingenuous of the owner to turn when he approved of the deal. There's still some people who think that he basically said, we're not going to pay him that money, so you got to figure out someplace to trade him. I think, to me, where Harrison is still rippable is whether he got maximum value, right? And the built-in issue of when you trade for a player who has been as injured as he has, and Anthony Davis, in effect, you're asking for, it's hard to have much sympathy, because you could say on Kyrie, well, how do you know he's going to get hurt? He hasn't been hurt his whole career. But Anthony Davis has been hurt almost his entire career. So to that extent, I think that's what had to probably make the GM very vulnerable, even if, as we said, the owner is the guy who might have been, demanding a deal in the first place.
That I think this was my reaction at the time. Why are you trading him now? And why don't you wait till June when more teams could get involved?
Exactly.
You'll probably get a better deal. And by the way, why don't you start by calling up a team like Milwaukee and trying to do something involving Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Exactly right. Yeah, 100% true.
You start there. You could call Minnesota Anthony Edwards. I can name.
Sure.
You could call Boston and talk to him about Jason Tatum. You could. Why are you just getting Anthony Davis, who, as Charles Barkley calls him, street clothes? He rarely plays. When he does, he's great. Listen, it's a stretch that he made the top 75 team in my book, but he did. But he just does not play enough. And no, the package was they got 10. You look at it and it's like they got robbed. They didn't get anything. You got for a Luka Doncic, a player of that stature, a guy who one day may be an MVP and he's probably may win a title in Los Angeles. You have to get a king's ransom. You have to get, 4 or 5 number 1 picks for future first picks.
No question.
You have to get a good rising young player. Or if you're going to go to Milwaukee and get Giannis Antetokounmpo, you have to work out a package there. But at least you're getting a 2-time MVP back who still has some years to go and can help you win a title. They didn't get nearly that in terms of the package.
NBA big knocker Mitch Lawrence kind enough to join us. The Wolves are starting to play better. They played a lot of pretty mediocre teams, but I should say Edwards is healthy again and playing very well. So they're trying to put this thing together after kind of an uneven start. The question on the table is the same as in many places. If the Wolves, let's say a month from now, are kind of spinning their wheels where they're not horrible, but they're looking like they're going to be a second rung Western Conference team with not maybe a great chance to get even as far as they did the last 2 seasons. Should they be interested in Ja Morant, who I think clearly is going to end up going someplace? I think that's pretty much inevitable. So it's the big Ja Morant question for you is, if they could work out the logistics on finances, which, by the way, would be complicated because I think they'd have to end up back in the second apron, which I don't think the new owners want to be. But if all that got worked out, is he worth the risk? What do you think about Ja landing, but not any place else? Is he worth whatever baggage he has at this point? What do you think?
If you asked me that a couple of years ago when he was second team All NBA, and before all the gun nonsense, I'd say absolutely. Make a run at him. Now, where he has regressed as a player, he's no longer one of the top 10 players in the league. He's got this stuff off the court, which you just don't know if that's over with and done with. Other unsettling things, including his father, who's more of a supporter than a guy who's going to act the father role.
Yeah.
That's not changing for the better, apparently. It depends what Memphis is looking for too. I mean, Memphis, I don't know if they're not going to just give him away, but they might be in a situation where they feel like we have to move on from him, and they'll accept, less than what people might think. I mean, there've been so many trades recently, Dan, where you've got the Knicks giving up 5, number 1 first round picks for Mikal Bridges. He's not worth that. You saw that, with in other situations, Gobert too, obviously. I don't know what Memphis is looking for. They're going to look for something, obviously, before they move on, because let's face it, once they move on for him, it's not going to be easy for them to get another player of his stature, at least what he was a couple of years ago. But like I said, he's not that same player. Gets hurt a lot. Not a good defender, not a great shooter. I mean, this is a guy who had his best days, sad to say, but like 2-3 years ago. So if I were Minnesota, no, I would not deal. I would look to do something else. I know Minnesota, listen, coming into this year, 2 years in a row, Western Conference Finals, didn't really, in either of them, compete very well because I think, they didn't even get to 6 games.
Correct.
So I'm saying, can they please get themselves a point guard here? A young, I'm not talking about the guys that, Mike Conley Jr., as great as he's been, it's time to move on, put him on the bench. Fine. DiVincenzo's not a point guard, neither is Rob Dillingham. To me, that seems to be a problem. And the other thing, too, is I'm just not big on Julius Randle being a second option on a championship team, maybe a third option. So there, I think they've got some problems too. But right now, the way they're composed, I don't think they can get by Oklahoma City. There might be another team or two out west they play in a conference finals they might not be able to get until they do something a little more radical or get another more talented player than what they have now after Anthony Edwards.
The biggest surprise in the league for you early this season?
Well, Orlando was supposed to be better. I think there's some issues going on with Jamal Mosley, who's a first-time head coach in his, third or fourth year there. And, they made the big trade for Desmond Bane. They gave up a lot.
Yeah.
They were supposed to hit the ground running. They haven't. I don't know if there's going to be – now they're saying Paolo Banchero and Mosley are having problems. I don't know. That's just the word out there. We'll see. Eastern Conference-wise, I think that in the West, I think a lot of people thought the Clippers, because they went and they brought in a lot of veteran guys like Brook Lopez and Chris Paul. Boy, they're in a world of trouble. They're probably going to have to make a move. I didn't think they'd be this bad this early, but I don't know if they can turn that around. Oklahoma City obviously isn't a surprise. They're head and shoulders to me above everybody else. So we'll go from there. But, and I thought Dallas was going to struggle. I didn't think Dallas was going to be good right away without Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving.
Can't be.
And putting making Cooper Flagg pass the ball to guys who aren't as good as he is instead of him just looking to go out and score.
What do you hear, lastly, on the Billups part of the big gambling / poker investigation? Because I've heard some media jackals say this is bad. I've heard others say, I need to hear a little bit more to the story, that if you really read what they have, it's not quite as dramatic as it appeared in the press conference the first day. What are you hearing from people you know in the league about the Billups situation?
Haven't heard a lot, but my immediate reaction was the poker stuff was one thing, but to give information about your team to people who are then going to turn and use it in a gambling situation, giving inside information out, that to me was a hanging offense. That to me was, he's never going to work again in the NBA. And, that to me, I read it in the indictment. That was really, really startling. He took information about that he knew that they were going to tank games, and he told people who had a vested interest in, making bets. That is a huge no. That strikes the whole integrity issue. I've known Chauncey Billups a long time, since he was a player, a great guy. And my question that hasn't been answered yet is, what forced him to become a guy who is associated with the types of people you can't be associated with if you're coaching in the NBA? People in the mafia, people who are running crooked car games.
Yeah.
What was the reason? Did he? Well, I mean, it sounds like from the outside, I have no knowledge, but must he have been up to his neck in all kinds of debts where he needed to do this, where people forced him to do this? I don't know. That to me, because he always struck me as a real class guy, that to me is the real puzzler. But there has to be an explanation for how you would associate yourself with the types of people who the league, if they know you're associating with those people and they can prove it, I don't think you're going to work again in the NBA.
Great stuff, man. As always, good to catch up, and we'll be in touch soon. But by the way, now that I think the Sirius XM NBA shows are also on NBA TV, when you fill in, then you got to get dressed up more than usual. Is it a whole different bag doing the show when you got to worry about the camera? Not just, you can't slouch like you usually do on a radio situation?
You'll find out tomorrow morning.
Oh.
I'm on from 7 to 8 because Scalabrini and NBC have another 8 o'clock Eastern start, Boston and Philly. So I am subbing for Brian Scalabrini.
Nice.
But no, I just go in there looking great as always.
There you go.
And
gotta be you.
My legion of fans always call me up to support me, but everybody should tune in because I'm sure Frank Isola and I will be talking at length about Nico Harrison,
yes.
All the games today, and we'll probably even talk about Michael Ray Richardson and a bunch of other stuff. But it's only 1 hour because then Scal
he's back.
Can play. As Michael Jordan would say, what are you doing with the other 22 hours?
That's true. Thanks, man. Good to catch up. We'll talk soon.
All right, Dan. Same here.
Thanks. Mitch.
Take care,
appreciate you. Mitch Lawrence, one of our favorites over the years, kind enough to give us plenty extended time. Luigi is going to join about a half hour from now. Top 5 at 5 with Blake Moore is coming up, including
Wild Wolves and a new Viking signing.